All right. So happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. Today I thought it would be fun to focus on New Year's resolutions for Salesforce reporting. There are a lot of things that we sort of limp along with, messes on the reports tab, outdated custom report types, even just things that we've thought about doing but haven't done. And maybe this is a good time of year for lining up other resolutions in our lives. Why not do them for Salesforce reporting? I thought to ask each of you if you have something you're committing to this year related to reporting, and then I thought to walk through some of my own. Again, welcome. My name is David Carnes. I'm the founder and CEO of OpFocus, and today in the Dashboard Dojo, we're going to focus on New Year's resolutions for Salesforce reporting. All right, so we'll get started today. I'll just do a quick intro on myself. We'll talk about some upcoming Dojo topics, and that's mainly to buy some time. Again, for those of you that are just joining, for anyone that wants to, I'd love to ask if you'd share what you're going to focus on for reporting this year. What's your resolution related to reporting? So we'll use the hand raise feature and unmute you, have you introduce yourself and share your resolution. Thought that would be fun. And then I've got a pile of ideas for New Year's resolutions. If you haven't decided on one, just some suggestions for things, best practices and whatnot that we can talk through. We'll talk through some upcoming OpFocus events, and then we can spend the remaining time on Q&A. So hopefully that's a good agenda. So Daniel's already raised his hand. Daniel, wait 1 second. We'll give you another second. For those of you that don't know me, I'm David Carnes, the founder and CEO of OpFocus. I've spent a lot of time around the platform, really appreciate the Platform Champion program. It's been fantastic. Somehow I'm in my 16th year of teaching on the platform, and it just keeps getting better and better. And all of these great skills I learned as a tour guide and high school teacher in Japan. So OpFocus, we're based in US and Canada. We're a Gold Salesforce partner, and we mainly work with SaaS companies on their revenue operations, which is really a thrill and an honor. And so much of it has to do with analytics metrics, making good decisions about the business. All right. So for upcoming Dojo sessions, January 20th, we'll do a deep dive on joined reports, and that'll be a hands-on session. As before, if you haven't joined us for a hands-on session, I'll ask you to create a special kind of dev org to use. For those of you that have already created it, you do not need to create a new one. We'll just ask you to run the Trailhead Data Manager to move all the dates into Q1, but I can explain that on the day. So February 3rd, Daniel Gorton will join me to do reporting in the nonprofit service pack. So if you don't know anything about the NPSP data model that gets added into Salesforce, might be a good opportunity. At some point, you might have an opportunity to help out a nonprofit, or many of you already could be coming from nonprofits. So hopefully there's a win-win there. And then starting at the end of February, we'll do what I think will be 3 sessions focused on formulas in reporting. It's just such a useful skill set. In fact, I'll be talking at the Cactus Force next week. I'll do a hands-on session on formulas and reporting as well, but just feels like a good thing to start the year with. All right, so I'm really curious. Oh, and this is the, if you are thinking to join the January 20th session, the hands-on on joined reports, before joining the session, I just ask that you follow 3 steps and set up a special kind of dev org so you can do the exercises with us. The link for that is just bit.ly and then /dojo_setup, and you can follow the 3 steps. It probably takes 10 minutes to do that. It's great if you do it before the session. All right, so what I'd like to ask is if anyone would like to, we have Kyle on the OpFocus team who's acting as host. He'll look for raised hands and unmute you, ask you your name, where maybe you can offer your name, where you're based, and then if you have 1 or more reporting resolutions. Maybe Daniel can get us started.
Hello, everyone. It's Daniel. I'm based out of the Boston area, and For me, it's doing more tinkering, David. It's what you're inspiring here, is to sort of stay current on features and just have fun exploring out the latest that's happened within reports and dashboards. So, and then specifically an NPSP, do a little more sort of tinkering and immersion in there too. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Does anyone else want to share what they're thinking about New Year's resolutions wise for reporting? All right, maybe Tim can go.
Good morning. Hey, this is Tim, and I'm based in Bath, Maine. And I think I have a couple of things. One actually shared with Daniel is just deciding to spend more time on the learning side of things and just always allocating time each week to like do sessions like this, do some of the local user groups that we have, and really just immersing myself in some of the newness and trying things out. Yeah, the second piece is around being more rigorous and intentional when creating a report, treating it like something that's more valuable than I think it gets treated by some folks. In other words, reports like Google Documents can be created so easily. They just start to kind of proliferate throughout the organization. And so what I've got a list of things here is being much more kind of meticulous about it. And so I'm a consultant, but I work with a couple of groups very regularly. And when I'm asked to create a report, being really almost like building an application, going over some of the requirements and getting people to decide who is it really for, who needs to access it, always testing it as the different users to make sure that permissions aren't in the way. Nothing worse than like delivering a report and finding out 3 weeks later they never really tried it and it turns out they can't access two of the objects.
Oh, that's the worst.
They're included in it. And then the other is actually meeting with the users of the report to make sure they understand the data. And then the last one that I just came up with from yesterday, I can't remember if it was in one of your sessions or not, but showing like the 3 different ways to find a report. And I've got some people that I work with that really only need 2 or 3 reports. And so showing them the favorites capability.
Oh, I love it.
Or they're like perfect report. It's like, I think everyone should have at least 2 or 3 favorite reports. So those are things that I'm reviewing with people now. Each time I kind of get engaged to work on a report.
And Tim, you touched on something as well. So thank you so much, Tim. That's awesome. And
sure.
Having had many generations on the Maine coast, I'm thrilled that you're in Bath. That's great.
Great.
You touched on something really important. I feel like if I think back to 2 things that really propelled my own career, one is an understanding of data. I took a summer class at Harvard one summer, on database management, and it was fantastic. It's like my eyes opened. The second is really trying to produce reports that help move the needle on the business. And that comment of yours around it is as easy as Google Docs. I think of a lot of the reporting that I do on a daily basis as almost like queries. Mm-hmm. And Salesforce has a query tool. And many of them I don't even save because it's so simple to create it again the next time, right? So if there's something meaningful, I'll save it. But otherwise, it's more like, I just want to know the number. Oh, it's 42. Okay, good. So whatever that result is. But I think that gap, there is a gap between slapping stuff together and maybe it's a gulf between slapping stuff together and producing things that the business can really take advantage of. And I've got a few of my own resolution suggestions in this session related to that. So I appreciate you teeing that up.
Sure.
And anyone else want to share? We've got, Rich Engelhard's on the call. I bet he would like to share something. Not to put him on the spot, but Rich is a very prominent speaker and participant in the Salesforce community. Rich, any, I don't know if he hasn't raised his hand, but just thought to pick on him. All right, he's raised his hand. Thank you, Rich. Kyle, are you able to unmute him?
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you too. Doing well, thanks. My resolution is to just triple down on reporting. It's one of those, things things that you have, but I really want to start running my business purely from reports. So yeah, I have reports, but I need to be every day with the dashboard in front of me. So that's my New Year's resolution.
Oh, and that's great. So this is from the entrepreneurial angle of running your own business. And
Yep.
And I'm curious, do you sort of think of looking at them on your phone through the Salesforce mobile app or on a tablet?
I would love to get them on tablet. Absolutely. I think it'd be great. I've done it on the phone a little bit, more on the new business side, trying to understand what opportunities we might have open or what we have won, but not so much on the kind of task management side of the business. So our company, as a Salesforce partner, we have projects and tasks and various things within Salesforce, use Salesforce as a project management tool. And as a result, I don't use the phone for that kind of reporting. Like I said, I have done it for like opportunity reporting, but that's where I'd like to really start to change it and start to have a lot more visibility into everything across the business.
Yeah, that's great. And what gets exciting there is thinking of a shift from looking at trailing to looking at leading indicators. So,
Yep.
Are we looking at just what happened in the past, or is there any way we can be, somewhat ahead of the curve, whether it's using some of the AI stuff or just looking at what's open and what's coming and being aware of trends. So that's great. Tripling down on reporting. All right, Rich, I'm going to check in with you on that later in the year. And
love it.
Look forward to hearing your progress. Is there anyone else that'd like to share a resolution? I know Bill Hare has been spending a lot of time on trailhead badges and whatnot. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll monitor. Let's do this session a bit more open. If you want to chime in and say something or ask a question, why don't you raise your hand? Kyle can monitor it, and we'll just try to weave that in. But for now, I'll just shift in and just share some things that I've been thinking about and ideas for resolutions for people. So there's the age-old one, clean up my reports tab. It's sort of like having 3 teenagers in my home. Sort of like the clean up your room. Well, it's really only one that in my house that needs to be reminded. Cleaning up the reports tab. There's just so much junk that gets proliferated in the systems, and like Tim said, it's just so easy to just kind of create stuff and leave it there laying there. Well, we can manage it pretty easily. We can create a report on reports. The report type has just been sitting there waiting for you. Export it to Excel, and I suggest you do that before you start mucking around looking at reports, because you don't want to overwrite the last run date. But within that Excel export, you can see the name of the report, the folder, the created date, last run date, who created it, stuff like that. And usually there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for people who left 5 years ago, or just entire departments that aren't using the system anymore. Maybe somebody moved off to use another tool for service instead of Service Cloud, and they just don't need that stuff anymore. You might also, within the Excel file, just highlight things and review that with owners and creators and just figure out, is this stuff even used? If something hasn't been run in a year, it's probably not being used. That could be a good thing. And you might create a hidden folder called the Old Report Archive and just start moving reports into them. And it takes time to do this, but what you end up with is a much cleaner reports tab. And you might, there's this, reports going in the reports tab, it doesn't consume any storage space. So you could leave them there, forever, or you could decide to purge them 6 months later. I tend to like to put them in a report archive folder, because somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, that was my favorite report, even though they hadn't run it in a year. The same is true with the dashboards tab. I'll never forget, it was 2005, one of the first user group meetings that I went to, and the company that was presenting at the user group meeting had 700 dashboards. My mind was blown, just thinking about managing 700 dashboards. But probably that system still has that same 700 dashboards all these years later, plus another 10,000 dashboards layered on top. It was an enterprise company. the one difference with doing this on the dashboards tab is you want to create a custom report type first. There are about 50 things that we can only report on if you have first created a custom report type, and dashboards is one of those things. So once you create the custom report type on dashboards, then you can go ahead and create a report on dashboards and export that. Another option is to use the data loader. Believe it or not, you can export your list of dashboards using the data loader. And interestingly, the information that's provided is a little different, just slightly different than what you get when you use this within the system. If you do create that report in the system, sort of an interesting little nuance is this column here called using grid layout. This will tell you if it's a Lightning dashboard. You may actually have some old classic dashboards that haven't been saved as Lightning and essentially upgraded to Lightning. Until you do that, you're not taking advantage of some of the newer stuff. Very specifically, Lightning tables is one of those things. All right, so the next one is you might commit to preparing to use each new release's reporting features. You know, the spring release hasn't gone live yet, but we're getting close, and you can, in the meantime, try out these features in a new pre-release org, read the release notes. As soon as the release is live in your production environment, you might activate and start using some of the new features. There's been quite a long run the last couple of years, especially with Lightning, that new reporting features have been introduced as beta. So within the winter 21 release, the beta feature that was added is the auto add of custom fields to custom report types. If you don't check the box, you don't get to use it. The trend has been that they've had for one or two releases, typically it's been one, that a feature has been left as beta and it's required a checkbox, and then once it's gone GA or been made generally available, you no longer need to check the checkbox. But some of these features you have to activate, but certainly if you don't use the new features, they're just not in your arsenal. So it's worth tinkering with them. All right. So another one that I think Tim talked about before is ensuring that features that your users have access to the reports. And there's a couple ways that's controlled. One, I think Tim was talking about the folder structure and the sharing on the folders. Well, very, very interestingly, and if you've seen me present at all in the last 2 years, you've seen me sort of talk about this blog article I wrote. This one time I wrote a blog article. And believe it or not, only 4 out of 31 reporting permissions are set by default within profiles. And to me, that's crazy. But what that means is those of us that have rolled out Lightning in the last couple of years, we may not be using all the good stuff. We may not be giving that out to our users. So in this blog article, what I did was talk about different groups of users like managers, end users, managers, report and dashboard super users, and what permissions you might give out to support them. I think this is a really good one. If you don't have one for this year, maybe this is a Q1 sort of resolution to ensure everybody can do what they need to do. Another resolution is to write descriptions on all reports. When you go to save a report, it's not required. We can record up to 255 characters, so that's a good sentence or a phrase to describe the report. And what I'd like you to hold as the sort of the threshold of excellence is that if you were describing this to a beloved family member who is sight impaired, how would you describe this? So you can see here for this report, I've said dashboard report showing all open opportunities by sales owner with a close date in the fiscal quarter. Somebody looking at that should know a couple of things right away. A, that this is something supporting a dashboard, which means keep your paws off, don't change it. And then B, what the actual report is giving us. We usually use the word by to indicate grouping. You might indicate some of the columns or if there are any special calculations, formulas, you might reference them. You might say whether it's for a particular region or a particular time, within your description. I know this sounds kind of silly, but just thinking of people making use of it, and Tim talking earlier about favorites. The thing I can tell you is most executives see way too many reports and dashboards, and they can't find anything. They can't make sense of it. And the worst thing is people reporting off of something that was created years ago and isn't really what you intended, and they're essentially making decisions on the wrong stuff. It's just terrible, terrible. So, okay, so that's another one. So similarly with dashboards, what I suggest is that you thoughtfully describe all dashboard components. Now, I'm not saying go overboard, but I think back to, I've been in the Austin airport a bunch of times, and the first time I showed up, I literally could not figure out where to catch my Uber. And I thought, nobody actually thought about this. And what was so funny, like a bunch of lemmings, a bunch of us got off the planes. We weren't connected, just separate travelers, and we followed some signs into the parking garage, and then literally couldn't figure out what to do next. So what we had to do, which wasn't clear, is we had to sort of turn around, go up an elevator of one floor, and then follow the signs from there. But there was a total breakdown. And I think of this with dashboards, that so many of us create dashboards and it's not really clear. I'd even go one step further to hold a training session to just really go into what each thing is. So you have up to 80 characters in the title. You have up to 40 characters below the title for the subtitle, and that's a smaller font. Oddly, it's 40 characters. I don't know why. And then the footer can be up to 255 characters. Now, each one of these could be truncated if depending on your component sizing. So you want to, wow, just talking about truncated, I've truncated my own stuff with how the PowerPoint is presenting. I apologize, that's really funny. For a confused executive trying to make quick decisions on something, it's amazing how often they glean the wrong information from something. So I do think this is something to be focused on. Think of it as like a space shuttle cockpit. Somebody gets in the cockpit and they're just completely overwhelmed by what they're seeing. All right. So I don't know if there was something in the Q&A. Oh, okay, great. So Ward asked the question, is there any way to mass move reports to the hidden folder, or is it all one at a time? This is one of those cases where you might actually benefit from jumping back to Classic, because in Classic on the Reports tab, you can do both report and dashboard. You can manage reports in report folders and dashboards in dashboard folders, and you can do drag and drop. I believe that's still possible in Classic, whereas it's a little bit more onesie-twosie, moving things around. If anyone else has another suggestion, please chime in. So Ward, hopefully that's helpful to you. Great question. All right. Another New Year's resolution is to embrace the power of formulas. And this is one, I'm thinking to do 3 Dashboard Dojo sessions on formulas, just because it's such a big topic. Formulas solve all kinds of problems, and a lot of it's sort of buried in the functions within the formulas that do the heavy lifting. If we need to transform the data slightly, if we need to do a little bit of math on it, if we need to pull a value from somewhere else, there are all kinds of functions that solve very specific problems. And we use these within custom formula fields. We use these within row-level formulas, summary formulas, cross-block formulas. I feel like I'm missing one, but we use them in different places. And with the changes in Lightning, when row-level formulas were introduced, both the row-level formula and the summary formula editors were upgraded, and they're both quite nice compared to all the other formula editors in Salesforce. But this is one of those things that you just have to, it's a slog. You've got to, like Rich said, triple down and commit. Formulas seem like this mysterious dark art as you're learning them, and you have to beg, borrow, and steal. And there are a lot of helpful things, even within Salesforce, examples of formulas that you can poach. They may not be exactly what you need, but you can just modify it slightly to get what you need. This is, if you don't have a New Year's resolution for the year, this is a good one to improve your overall report and dashboard capability. I tend to hear Mozart and Beethoven when I write formulas to support reports and dashboards. It just sort of gets that almost mystical, which is pretty fun. All right. Another one related to, I had the word cross-block formulas. That's definitely related to joined reports. If you haven't spent a lot of time with these, and to give a plug to the January 20th Dojo session, where we'll do hands-on with joined reports, these do more than you think they do. And they do more than you think they do for a couple of reasons. One is, in the last years, probably a year ago, Salesforce made a change, and it was a very quiet change that they allowed you to use the same report type over and over within a joined report. In the olden days, we couldn't. We would use one report type only once. And you can see my example here on the left, the one in OpenOps with open cases. I remember using this example for years because A, it's a really good example, but the reason I used opportunities with products as the left block was I figured one opportunities would all have products, and I couldn't reuse the plain opportunities report type, which you can see is the second one, the one in the green header for OpenOps. And I figured some of the earlier stage opportunities may not have products, so I wouldn't want to use opportunities with products because they wouldn't show up. Traditionally. And then you can see the third block here, cases, open priority one cases. Anyway, with joined reports, you can have up to 5 blocks, and we can just do really interesting things. If you need a different type of structure, and maybe it's something like, I'm thinking of Daniel with his organization. Maybe there are different types of funding or grants, and maybe you have record types on an opportunity for different types, and you want to show the different types of gifts that have been allocated or grants. But one column might be grant opportunities that are grants, another type might be some other type of funding or gifts, another type might be donations in kind or something like that. But you could use joined reports and put them all side by side.
David,
Yep.
Donna had a quick question about descriptions. She's wondering if
Sure.
there's a way to easily edit the description of a report without having to edit the report itself.
Oh, great question. So, you know what? I have a system open, as I usually do, because of great questions like this. So, if we, and I'm not working on my 35-inch screen today, so just working on my little 16-inch screen. We can see here a description on a report. If we come into the down arrow here, we can go in and edit the report, but there is no way to double click in. So it does look like at this point we don't have any inline editing to just be able to come in and just quickly write them. Something that I haven't tried is to use the data loader. So that would be kind of interesting, because I believe with the data loader, we can pull a list of the similar reporting columns. The question would be, can you write with the data loader? I imagine that we can. I just haven't tried. So if you're an administrator in your system and you're comfortable with it, maybe you back up all the reports and just see if that's possible. I haven't tried it. So, but otherwise, when you're editing a report, and this gets into your question, we have the ability to save, and if it's a new, we can write the description. Otherwise, we can go right into the properties and update the description. Maybe somebody has another idea that they want to share. All right, so great question, thank you. All right, another idea for a New Year's resolution is to leverage more color. So we have a couple of ways to do that. Certainly within reports, you could add a chart. But another thing we can do with reports is to take advantage of conditional formatting. A lot of people don't see this. It's in the bottom right-hand corner. When you add your first grouping to a report, the toggle switches appear across the bottom, as does the conditional formatting in the bottom right corner. You also need one more thing. You need some kind of a summed up column, either summary, a min, max, an average. And we can have up to 3 of these conditional formatting per report. Each one can have up to 3 different color thresholds if you wish, and you could choose from millions of colors. So this sort of standard red, yellow, green, for whatever reason, shows up as red, orange, green in my system. So you could do something like this, and you can see specific things highlighted that may call your attention. I do want to point out that there is another sort of interesting thing you can do, is you don't have to use 3 colors. In fact, you can reduce it down to 2 numbers, and one of the colors can be no color. And that's what I've done in this example here. So I'm thinking of like Rich running his business and looking at a list of projects and looking for ones that have either, like projects are maybe projects that are closed, that have unused funds, and maybe you're wondering why, or looking for anomalies within your projects where there's been an overage but it hasn't been approved or something like that. So you can do interesting things like call out just very specific and not have an entire wall of color if that's too much, but call out very specific things. And that can be really powerful for your leaders who might be looking across large sets of data, just looking for particular anomalies. So keep that in mind, that no color is absolutely an option, as is the ability to use up to, you can have up to 3 color thresholds and you can choose from millions of colors. So on dashboards, we have 14 color palettes, as you may know, plus we have the light and dark themes. And you probably know that we also, an entire dashboard can be light or dark. And then each component can also be light or dark. So if you need to make something pop that way, you can do that. I really like watermelon. That's just me as far as the dashboard palette. Be interesting to hear if anybody else has a favorite. Maybe that's something you can throw in the Q&A or raise your hand. If you guys have one that's really, I've never used the mineral for accessible. I suppose that's probably a valuable one. I've just never tried it. The other thing to note is that on dashboards within lightning tables, it's so worth it to go spend some time learning about lightning tables. They're very, very special. They're very powerful. They do not behave like any of the other types of components on a dashboard. They do offer conditional formatting within the lightning table. So it's another way to take advantage of color. Another idea for a New Year's resolution is to try out different chart and component types. The scatter plot was a big one for me in 2020. I think I'd kind of shied away from them. You might have had the same experience as me. The first time you try it, you just kind of get a line of dots across. It's like a 45-degree angle going from the bottom left up to the top right of just dots, and you think this is useless. Well, you kind of need to play with them a bit to get a good use case for it. The one that I have here, just to point it out, is a joined report, and I have 1 opportunities from the current fiscal year, and I'm using this win percentage, and I'm mapping that against the open opportunities. So if we take the 1 opportunities, let's say it's from 2020, and we take that win percentage and map it against the open opportunities, it's a really good use case for a scatter plot to see what are the best bets for us in the new year. There are other types of interesting tricks, like something that I did during the COVID. What did where were deals dying? If I looked at the from stage and where did they go from to a closed lost before coronavirus. So I'm grouping by the from stage across the bottom on this one. And then that has a termination date of, it's probably like sometime in April, whenever the coronavirus started going. I mean, it was definitely March, and then, what did it look like after? And so we started seeing deals die earlier in the sales process. And the question is, like any Monty Python fan would want to know, are they truly dead? I'm not dead yet. Some of these things came back alive, and that may be a whole other thing we might look at. But, you can do interesting things by just trying out different charts and component types. And I definitely wanted to include the lightning table again here. They're just so powerful. Keep in mind that if you use a lightning table, they're not based on the underlying report. They're based on the underlying report type, and that gives you so many more options. So when you go to create a dashboard and you go to add a lightning table to the dashboard, just keep in mind that it's not based on the report, it's based on the report type. And so you have access to potentially over 1,000 fields on that lightning table, whereas when you create any of the other types of components, you're kind of beholden to what columns exist on the report itself that you've selected. If you are sort of fighting with slow dashboards as well, lightning tables can be helpful because, again, they're based on the underlying report type. And if you're able to use the underlying report type a couple times, that may speed up your dashboard to, if Salesforce is essentially running the same report under the hood each time. All right. So a couple of other ones, and I want to get to sort of the big money ideas for you. One of them is answering questions in chatter groups. So this is the Salesforce reports and dashboards chatter group. There are 6,000 people worldwide that are sort of asking questions. Why not get on here and answer a few questions? It's kind of fun. You try to beat Steve Moe to the answer, since he's always trying to answer. I mean, he just contributes so much to the community, answer questions for people. But some of them are, first timers asking things. Others are more intermediate. Some of them are impossible. But I think this is a nice way to contribute and also sort of get the juices flowing if you're thinking about how you might contribute to the community and how you might sort of get some good practice. Just trying to answer questions is good, or contribute to the overall understanding. All right. Okay, looks like Donna had another question. I was asked if there was a way to report on chatter. Yes. So Donna, great question. And you said you kept going saying specifically chatter in opportunities. So we can report on chatter. Chatter is one of those 50 or so things that the only way to report on it is to first create a custom report type. So if you're not an admin in your system, you need to ask an admin or somebody with the ability to create and manage report types. But they could create a report type on, I think there are a few chatter options, and you could start from there. You may have to tinker with it to zero in on what you're trying to do with opportunities specifically. I'm not entirely sure, without tinkering with it myself, if there's a way to zero in on some kind of a heat signature specifically for opportunities, but I'm willing to tinker with it after the session. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Great. All right, so next idea. I would love to see more people incorporate trending. So, if you're thinking of something, Rich said he's going to triple down on reports this year. Within that, leave some room for trending. So there are many ways to show trends in Salesforce. Up at the top here, this is just opportunities grouped on the close date twice. And you can look at seasonality. So you can see the years here are the colors. So the dark blue, I believe that was 2020. Of course, I can't see that well. And then 2019 is to the left, and 2018, and so on. And you can just look at the data across years. And in this case, it's grouped by year and by month. So it's grouped by month first. That's the outer grouping, calendar month. And then within that is the fiscal year. You can also use prev group val and parent group val functions. And I've got an example of that here to do, month over month type calculations. You've also got the option to use snapshots. A reporting snapshot, these things have seemed to be woefully underused. They're not new. They've been around for a decade. And you could do something like this. And this is, if every Monday night at midnight, or let's say 11 o'clock every Monday night, you copy your open pipeline into a reporting snapshot, and that would be stored in a separate, custom object. Every Monday night, religiously, you keep copying your open pipeline, and you include things like amount and stage, and we know the date of the snapshot, then you can do something like this. And for this particular company, this is 52 weeks of their open pipeline, and it tells a story. Each one of these are stages. This is probably the contract stage in orange, and this is probably the proposal stage in red, and this is probably some kind of a validation stage above it. but you can see the trend of the pipeline and tell a story from it. So really, this allows your execs and other folks making decisions to have confidence in the decisions they're making, rather than just seeing a number and trying to make sense of it, to see the trend. So I really would love to see more people incorporate trending in this. This is a good one. If you don't have a New Year's resolution, this would be a good one. Another one that I'd like to propose is, before creating your next report or dashboard, always ask. So you have an executive running by and she says, I need you to create this for me. Before she runs away to her next meeting, you might say, hey, what's the purpose of this? What decisions will be made with this? Who will use this? How often will this be used? What data points are the most important, meaning what columns? What data do you want to include or exclude? Do you have a mock-up? Sometimes people have a mock-up. I'm curious if anyone else has any questions. Maybe you could raise your, any go-to questions that you ask. Some of you are consultants. Curious if you have any go-to questions. Others, you're out there building. Kyle, maybe you can do the unmuting.
Hey, this is Tim. One that I keep coming across is being really clear about whether the person using the report should have the ability to make changes or not, or whether it's really important that they are just a reading user. So always having that discussion about where it's going to sit in the sharing folder kind of security structure. And,
oh, that's great.
And then educate, and then with that comes like, well, this person thinks they want to change it, but we really can't have them save changes because other users are relying on some of the filters that are kind of baked into the report. So that's a topic of conversation.
Oh, that's great. That's so important. I think over time, maybe I'm just cynical. I just assume that we don't want people to make changes. But if a user has the default permissions, they can create and run reports. They can create their own copy and save it to a private folder. Tim, you're a better person than I am. Going that extra step. Any other questions that you might ask? All right, I thought we'd have more tongues flowing today. Well, great. I think it's good to have a go-to list of questions. The ultimate question is like, what's the purpose? Why? What are you going to do with this? What decisions will be made? It provides such context, and it can often cut to it. Oh, great, Donna. Thank you for the update. I wasn't sure. It sort of felt like it should be possible because I believe we can manipulate reports through code, but I assumed that may be possible. Thank you for trying for us. So Donna answered her own question. Daniel, that's totally fine. Your question. So Donna furthered and said you can export but not update. So thank you. So the question earlier was, what are the ways to easily update descriptions on reports? And I sort of mused. It'd be interesting to look at what the data loader can do, and she confirmed that it's only export only for reports. Thank you.
I think Tim raised his hand as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just kind of related to the questions is the other thing that comes up regularly for me, and I work primarily in the nonprofit space, is in talking about a report, it's suddenly you realize that the person asking for it actually doesn't thoroughly understand the data structure or what data is even being collected. And so inevitably it leads to like a really good conversation about, oh, I guess we need some more fields, or, oh, I guess we need some roll-ups so we can have this data. So there's a little bit of a, oh, I thought we were talking about reporting and now we're talking about new fields and maybe even new data that needs to be collected. So I'm always watching out for that kind of creep into that area, which is not always a bad thing, but
yeah, it's so important because you've always got to do the delta of, do we have the data? Do we have the structure? How good is the data? Do the business processes support the data? All that. It always seems like you're not quite sure how thick the ice is when people are coming up with those kinds of questions. That's great. Really good stuff.
All right.
Right. So one other thing that I feel is really important, just as a commitment that all of us might make when creating reports and dashboards is to be in the room as these are being used. Okay. And, you know, it takes some, you know, fortitude to ask the question, can I sit in the meeting? I remember the first executive meeting I sat at one of the software companies I work with, and you know, I was kind of nervous to be in the room. And you know, this is a secret fraternity that meets every week and runs the business. And I'd created something for them, and I was like, I really should be in the room just to hear how you're using it. And after I did that, I was like, oh my God, this, you know, they talk about a bunch of nonsense too. They're just joking about stuff, and you know, it's not all that serious. But the other piece was that I learned so much about how they were using it, and you know, made notes on misunderstandings, ideas for improvement, training opportunities. The reality is that your leadership team doesn't always know what they're talking about, doesn't always understand the data or the nuances. Um, Another thing to do when you're in the room is to listen for the if only we could see this for Asia Pacific, if only we could see this for grants, if only we could see this for renewals, you know. And usually it's the if onlys that are a save as and then a modification of a filter, and you can look like a hero for creating it. But I found that I've learned so much being in the room as people are using it. And you kind of have to ask, you know, sometimes you have to ask permission to sit in the room, but it'll seem obvious after. I think it's a really good thing. It feels like one of those things that sort of elevates your game and elevates your value in the organization, to sit in the room and just be part and just watch how the information is being used. The worst feeling in the world is when people, the worst feeling in the world is when people are making when they're misunderstanding something, or they're, you know, that XYZ ratio that they're looking at, they're sort of using it in a different way than it's intended, or making an assumption. And this gets back to the having good descriptions and having good uh, headers, subheaders, and footers on your dashboard components. All right, so it looks like, did we have another suggestion that might have came and gone on the,
Donna had mentioned that you could export but not update.
okay, okay,
I think that's the last thing that we used.
great. All right. All right, so just as a quick recap, we talked about cleaning up reports and dashboard tabs. That's kind of a good place to start with New Year's resolutions. Preparing to use each new release's reporting features, like committing to that. You know, I guess having sort of watched 50 releases or so in the last 15 plus years, it's so easy to go to sleep for a few releases, and then a few releases later realize, oh my God, I didn't realize we could do this. It's one reason that I tinker as often as I do, is because I keep finding things that are useful that I didn't realize were there. So you might stay out ahead of that by just preparing. And usually, you know, the trend has been there have been 2 or 3 sort of publicly written about release features, and then there's some stuff under the hood for reporting specifically these last number of releases. Another one we talked about was ensuring that users have reporting permissions. Tim mentioned making sure that they have the right folder permissions as well. We talked about writing descriptions on reports, thoughtfully describing dashboard components, embracing the power of formulas, analyzing data using joined reports, leveraging color, trying out different charts and component types, answering questions in chatter groups, incorporating trending, asking questions, and then finally committing to being in the room as the reports are being used. I feel like that was one of the biggest game changers for me, was just essentially insisting on being there as, you know, as an executive or a group of executives are just trying to make sense of a new tool that you put in front of them. You can answer questions, you can you know, take good notes about how to improve upon it for V2. All right. Some upcoming Dojo sessions. Actually, before we do that, I'm really curious for everybody that's on the call today, where are you in your formula writing journey? So I've talked about, we'll do 3 upcoming Dojo sessions on formula writing. It'd be really helpful to get a sense of where everybody is in their formula writing. Kyle, might you launch the poll?
Yep, it should be available to everyone.
Okay, great. So where are you? Are you new to formula writing? Have you written a few, but not always sure that it's correct? Had some success, or are you a formula ninja? And I obviously was having some fun during the Georgia election announcements at like 2 in the morning, coming up with these these answers to the poll. But I think a lot of us sort of, you know, we have a little success, but not comfortable writing it on our own. And I'd love to help just move everybody forward in February and March with this one thing. Oh, that's great. Why don't we end it and we'll just show the results? Okay, so we've got a number that are new to formula writing, written a few, had some success. That's great. There might have been one more category that I could have put in there between that and Formula Ninja, but it was getting tired. It was like 2 o'clock when they were announcing the, you know, anyway. This one skill set will change your reporting life. The ability, and this is the same in Excel, and anybody who's got Excel chops, a lot of it boils down to keyboard shortcuts, and it boils down to formulas. So I think this is a great place to commit. And in the upcoming Dojo sessions, so I mentioned the January 20th, the hands-on, the deep dive on joined reports. If you're going to join that and you haven't done a hands-on with us before, I just ask you to follow the steps to create a special kind of dev org. It takes about 10 minutes to do it before the session. Daniel will join me in leading a session on nonprofit service PAC reporting. Is that what NPSP? Isn't that funny? I can't think of it. NPSP reporting, which is pretty cool. So this is a data model and functionality specific to supporting nonprofits. But I think what's really great about using a different data model to try out reporting features is it sort of forces us out of our comfort zone. So if you're not in the nonprofit world, still valuable to come and think about reporting on a different data model, which would be useful in your own org if you're talking about reporting on custom objects, let's say. Finally, on the 17th, we'll do the first hands-on session, Formulas for Reporting Part 1. We'll go through the formula editors, we'll go through testing the formulas, we'll try out some different formulas and functions, and then we'll tee up 2 more sessions going into March on formula writing. All right. So I've got 2 classes coming up. If you know of anybody that might be interested, February 22nd to the 26th is Salesforce administration. And then March 9th and 10th, we'll do a 2-day just focused on every switch and lever and reporting that I can think of. It's really been a lot of fun, and I've got a discount offer here for both classes if you know of somebody that might benefit. Oops, not sure what I just did there. Let's get rid of this. Oh, that's too funny. That's me with short hair. Why don't we open it up in case anybody has any other questions or topics? For anybody have any new thoughts on resolutions heading into 2021 since participating in this call? Kyle, how about for you with your report writing? Anything that you might focus on?
Yeah, I think for me, overall, just improving my reporting abilities. There's one report that I've been trying to make for a month now, and I still can't figure it out. So a very targeted resolution, but I'm hoping to gain the skill set needed to build out that specific report.
Well, it seems like Rich and Tim run consulting shops or part of, do consulting. They may be able to help. Well, cool. Guys, it's really a pleasure. I'm very glad to stay on for a few minutes if there are things you want to talk about or we didn't address. Oh, so it looks like we're using the chat feature. Oh, so Heather said, help with formulas. Great. I hope you join us in February for that. Yes, thanks, Tim. Probably some room between some success and Ninja. I agree. Sorry, I didn't give room for that. Thank you guys for the feedback. That's awesome. Anyone else have any questions that you'd like to address before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It's really a pleasure. And I do look forward to seeing you at a future dojo. So thank you for participating.
Thank you, everyone.